consumers. This is generally not forthcoming for various reasons, like lack of appreciation, aversion to acknowledge their contribution, and even the desire to circumscribe the organization if seen as a competitor for scarce resources. The best way to handle this issue is to involve the recipient at various stages of the intelligence cycle, including collection and its operationalization. It's best when the recipients themselves acknowledge and lobby for a larger role for the intelligence agency. This doesn't come up easily and is based on the level of trust that one has built assiduously over a period. I would like to share with you that when the attack, if you recall, in I think 2016 or 15 was it, there was an attack on Pathankot Air Force Station, and there was a general alert. And I was at that time with the NTR, and we tried to, collect the intelligence from NTR. Does the collection of intelligence through technical resources. So anyway, we were in the process of sharing whatever intelligence was required by the armed forces. And then I realized that there was not much of appreciation coming for what we were getting. And the result was because there was a delay, there was a time lag between the collection and the sharing. So we thought about it, and much against the wishes of my own personnel, we decided to invite the armed forces personnel to sit with us within the organization and look at what was coming off the belt, so to say. And I must say that this resulted in creating a lot of trust between us as an agency and our consumers, that is the armed forces. And that's the way, it paved the way for the armed forces to, lobby with the government that, look, this organization has been giving us good intelligence. So please, whatever resources that are needed to strengthen the organization. So somebody else was doing the lobbying for you rather than you yourself. I mean, it added to the general, I would say, it's very difficult to get resources from the government unless you are able to muster enough support. And this was one of the ways that we worked it out. A fifth major takeaway, I would say, from the intelligence world is the importance of interpersonal communications. The art and skills in communicating with colleagues, with your agents on the ground, with peer groups, is something a career in intelligence prepares you for. It is a given that a successful intelligence officer must be a keen and patient listener. To draw out information, there is a need to have empathy for the interlocutor and the skill set to draw him out. One of my seniors, when I was a junior officer in the Intelligence Bureau, he gave me a lesson which I forgot throughout my career. He said, nobody volunteers information. You have to ask the right questions. And if you don't have the capacity to ask the right questions, you will never get the intelligence that you're looking for. And this is the maxim which, as I said, stood me throughout my career in good state. So, communication is a very important thing. And sometimes, even asking a misleading question, a question which is factually not corroborated, elicits and gives you a very clear answer. I mean, suppose if I tell somebody, it's raining outside, if I make a statement like that, the person will say, no sir, it's bright sunshine outside and the temperature is so much so. So you get your answers by even asking a deceptive question. So that is something which is part of the intelligence, I would say, habit, more or less. One of the lessons of October 7 attacks, as I mentioned, is that there is a need to develop the ability to think like your adversary or competition. Now just think back. While the Israelis were confident that Hamas had developed enough states to maintain the status quo in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader, had other ideas. It is now being assessed that the internal political dissent in Israel, combined with the turmoil amongst the reservists in the Israeli defense forces, encouraged Hamas to perceive that Israel was disoriented and an assault would shock the world and bring the two-state solution back on the agenda, as it would disrupt the Abrahamic Accords and close the pitch for the Arab nations who sought accommodation with Israel. Moreover, it is something that needs to be understood, that how your adversary is perceiving you is equally important as you perceive the adversary. And based on this, a lot of conflict situations have arisen. Because you felt that the adversary is weak, the adversary felt that you were in a down position, and that is how perceptions clashed, and you had a difficult situation on your hands. So even in the corporate world, I think, to my mind, it would be a good idea to understand how the adversary or your competition thinks about you. So I'll talk about the last takeaway that I feel which is very important, and that is about building resilience within organizations. Resilience is not to be limited to only quick recovery, but also to respond to unforeseen events, even aggressively, I would say. A general perception is that intelligence organizations should be able to foresee and not be taken by surprise. Now, it's a given that people say, why was this event not foreseen? Why were the 8 organizations taken by surprise by a so-called black swan event? However, the issue is that if you are prepared and able to foresee every surprise, then it's not a surprise in itself. So the focus should be rather on creating and validating processes that allow an organization to respond effectively to any eventuality, not only in terms of recovery, but also to neutralize the threat that emerges. For this, the gap between the information or intelligence and the response has to be narrowed to the minimum. And this may mean complete overhaul of existing structures, organizational culture, and even priorities. It may entail breaking of silos, embedding personnel in, as I said, the consumer organizations and the like. And this would generally depend upon the nature of the threat or competition. Now, again, an episode that happened in my area, my escort, Harsh and Shraddha, they were asking me to share some of the success stories. I said success stories are filed away because they have no consequence for the organization as such. Because if you've done something well, first thing, the circumstances will never be the same again. And the second more important thing is that you have learned to do things the right way, and it is ingrained in your DNA. So I said that the more important thing is to share your failures and ensure that the right lessons are learned. And I will share with you a failure which happened with me. If you recall, that in the June 2014, when there was change of government, there was an incident which involved Indians who had been to Mosul and were there as laborers. I don't know how many would recall that there were 39 Indians who were killed in Mosul. Now, for me, that was a very critical moment. Because before that, whenever there was a discussion on the situation and I was the chief of the agency at that time, incidentally. So whenever there was a discussion on the situation in Syria and in Iraq, it sounded very distant. And we were not really clued up to the fact that there would be Indians in Iraq, working in Iraq, in a place like Mosul, which was the nerve center of ISIS. Our focus on ISIS was more about how they were using communications, the internet, and how they were trying to propagate their ideology and whether it was affecting our own citizenry or not. That was our focus. And suddenly out of the blue, this thing happens. And we get information that there were 39 Indians who were stranded and they had been. And the information came from one single witness. There was no other way to corroborate. So now the issue was, what do we do about it? How do we kind of corroborate this thing? And it took us a long time, a long effort. But the lesson from this was very clear. You see, what had happened was that we knew that there were Indians in the working in the Middle East. That's known to everybody. The government had issued advisories time and again that there should not be any effort to enter Iraq because it's a conflict zone, or Syria, it's a conflict zone. Not only that, the missions and the ministries of labor and all, they had been also geared up to ensure that no labor moved into that region. So we were all under the impression that the advisories and the mandates had been followed. Now the ground situation was that people had gone to, say, Kuwait, and they were drawn up on much higher wages into Iraq by contractors who had no qualms about putting them in a risk zone. And believe me, we had very little, to be frank, we had no information at all that so many Indians had gone across, and they were of all the places working in Mosul. And then when we sat down to do a post-mortem, we realized that there were communications which were coming from Mosul to Indian cities in India, particularly in Punjab. That means they were communicating with their families while the going was good. And nobody had really, kind of synergized this information in one place and come to the conclusion that, look, there are Indian people in Mosul. Mosul is the nerve center of ISIS. So, there's trouble ahead. I'm sharing this just to emphasize 2 points. One is the need to develop synergies within the organizations. The second is how you collect intelligence, how you interpret it is the critical thing. And the positive of this was that we were able to respond to this crisis very fast. If you recall, immediately after that there was this crisis of the Kerala nurses which had taken up employment again in Iraq, but mercifully they were in the southern part of Iraq and we were able to extricate them before they kind of got into trouble with the ISIS. So the point that I'm trying to make is that you may not be able to foresee an event, but it is more important that you set up processes to ensure that even if there's an event which takes you by surprise, you have the capacity to kind of respond to that event. And that is where, whatever the event may be, whether it is a natural calamity, your processes in the organization should be such, first to respond to it, and second to have synergies with other organizations which can help you out. And for that, you need to develop equations, relationships with their organizations for this kind of synergy. I have shared with you some of the takeaways. I know, I really don't know how valid they will be for you, but I think there is some element of which, if you give thought to it, you will find them useful. Thank you very much.